On behalf of the chairman, let me recognize Senator King.
Mr. Chair, could I defer to Senator King and trade places?
Absolutely. Senator King, please.
Thank you. Several observations based upon this excellent hearing. Number one, I want to associate myself with the chairman's comments about Afghanistan. I think the concern is that a decision has to be made in the next several months. I don't think we're going to learn anything in the next several months that we don't know now, because the drawdown, the scheduled drawdown, is going to have to start late this summer, early fall to make the January deadline. I sincerely hope that, given where we are, given the level of violence, given the really, I think, surprising, or I shouldn't say surprising, but the effectiveness of the Afghan forces, we ought to provide the support necessary, including the authorities, to maintain what we've gained there, which has been considerable. That's number one. Number two, a lot of talk here today about end strength. I've learned from talking to senior military officials, particularly in the Army, that readiness is as important as end strength. That you can have a big number, but if you've got 50% readiness or 30% or 60%, that's really important. So I think that's an important consideration. Finally, on the law of the sea, on China and the chart that we saw, it would really help, in my view, if we were members of the Law of the Sea Treaty, so we could be at the tribunal that's making these decisions. On the last point, Mr. Secretary, do you agree?
I do, yes. And I'm in the long line of defense officials who have, and Navy officers who have supported that agreement. We're not party to it, but we do respect its provisions.
It's not in our national interest to not be at the table, it seems to me.
Again, people have sat in this chair and testified for many years in favor of that treaty, but that has not carried the day.
Secretary Carter, the most disturbing thing you've said today, that in my view, is and you sort of touched on it, and then we went by in the hearing and never got back to it. You suggested there's been a rise of ethno-sectarianism in Baghdad. If that's the case, number one, that's a disaster, because that was what the Maliki policy is, what laid the groundwork for what happened with ISIL. Number two, what can we do about it, and are we trying to do something about it? And I'm not talking about just jawboning. Are we talking specific, direct pressure, if you will, on the Iraqi government? Because if Baghdad isn't inclusive, then this whole enterprise is just not going to be successful.
Yeah, well, what I was referring to is the turbulence in Baghdad, or just over the last couple of weeks, in which the Prime Minister has been contending with a variety of the opposition parties. That's a serious concern to us, because the integrity of the Iraqi state is an important part of the end state our strategy seeks. We support the Prime Minister Abadi in his overall approach, which is a multi-sectarian, as he says.
Is he backsliding on that? Because after several hearings, I've been told he's doing the right thing. He wants to do the right thing. Are we losing ground on that?
I had a conversation with him just a week and a half, and we were completely aligned on what we're trying to do there with respect to our campaign. But it's also true that he is contending with a very complicated mix there. And with respect to your question, what are we doing about it? In addition to providing political support, I want to reiterate the importance of the economic support. And that's not just by the United States, but by others as well. So when I was with the president in Riyadh last week, we were urging the Gulf states, that's a place that they could contribute. Don't cede Baghdad to Iran. Get in the game, support a multi-sectarian approach. That's what Abadi is trying to stand for. That's what Maliki didn't stand for. And it's important to support him, both politically and economically. And the economic situation is particularly important today in view of the low oil prices.
Concern about the Mosul Dam. Are you satisfied that the Italian contractor and the arrangement that's been made by the government in Iraq is sufficient and is going to be timely? It would be an absolute catastrophe if that dam went out.
It is. They are that is the best practices outfit to do grouting at the dam. And with respect to the timing question, that is the concern we all have, to get that grouting done as soon as possible to mitigate the risk that there are failures in the dam before the grouting is complete and this dam can be shored up.
One more quick question. General Dunford, we talked about how ISIL has been degraded, and that seems to be the consensus that I'm hearing in the last few weeks in terms of briefings from in various settings. Are they being degraded in terms of equipment as well as finances, manpower, foreign fighters? Where are they getting their equipment?
Senator, there is, as you can imagine, in Iraq in particular, there's no lack of AK-47s and weapons that have been left behind as a result of years at war. And I think primarily they got them from the former Iraqi soldiers, brought their weapons with them in large ammunition stores that they seized in the early days of the war. You'll recall they had pretty significant progress 2 years ago in grabbing ground and territory, and part of that ground was ammunition depots and weapons storage areas and so forth from the Iraqis.
Are they being squeezed now on that front, though?
Very much so, Senator. I mean, I would say that their freedom of movement has been reduced. Their ability to resupply with foreign fighters and equipment has been reduced, in addition to the resources that you spoke about. And so I would say that their military capability has been degraded to include their equipment.
Do we have any information that their morale is declining? We
do, Senator. That's an important point. In fact, of my observations on my recent trip and really over the last few months, I think one of the more significant things I see is the relative morale of the Iraqi security forces and the Peshmerga versus ISIL. And we see in the intelligence and anecdotally from our commanders that the morale and the spirit of ISIL has eroded over time as a result of their battlefield losses and as a result of the fact that their pay has been cut significantly because of the resources constraints that the leadership has.
Always a negative effect on morale.
Has a negative effect on morale.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.